struggling with shrimp? Are you having issues just keeping them alive? Did you know that there stands to be a pretty good chance that the reason you keep having shrimp die on you may not even be your fault? My name is Mark, and I have been keeping and breeding shrimp for over 8 years. The shrimp keeping hobby has literally changed my life. I have never had a more rewarding and life-changing hobby, and I really truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. What started out as let's try putting some of these pretty little water bugs in a tank and seeing what happens 8 years ago, to now actually breeding shrimp for a full-time living now for over 3 years. I was able to quit a job that had me living on the road away from my family over half the time, to always being able to be there for them whenever needed, all because of shrimp keeping. So when I say shrimp keeping has changed my life, I really mean that in the most profound way possible. But keeping shrimp is so much more than just my way out of a crappy job that forced me to live out of cheap hotels. It is my peace and my sense of accomplishment. What could be more rewarding than turning a handful of shrimp into hundreds in just a matter of months? What could bring you more peace and serenity than sitting in front of a natural habitat that you created, and then spending every moment you can watching these little creatures breed, multiply, and go about their little shrimp lives? They live in a world that you have created for them, and words cannot describe the sense of accomplishment that you feel when you finally get it right. The good news is that it really is not hard. In fact, it can be pretty easy, even extremely easy once you get these simple aspects of keeping cherry shrimp down. The most important aspect being stability. Then, to make sure you start off right, you need to make sure that your aquarium is fully cycled. The next biggest key is that you feed the right food in the right amount. Then you need to make sure you get good, healthy shrimp to start off with. That's the part where you could be doing everything right, but if you start off with sick, diseased, or stressed out shrimp, you're going to have a hell of a hard time getting started out. And then finally, I'll cover how to have success over time in the long haul. Fully cycled aquarium. What exactly does it mean to have a cycled aquarium? Well, if you've been around and kept any kind of aquarium before, you may be familiar with the term cycled aquarium. A cycled aquarium refers to the ability of your aquarium to break down waste that is produced by the tank's inhabitants. This goes for all aquariums, whether it be a shrimp tank, a fish tank, or even a saltwater tank. When you feed your aquarium, the critters in the tank eat the food. What happens next when any critter eats food? It makes poop. Well, when you have critters pooping in their home, there needs to be a way for the waste to break down. This is done with nitrifying bacteria. The waste starts out as ammonia. The nitrifying bacteria then converts the ammonia to nitrite, which is still harmful, but way less harmful than ammonia. The nitrifying bacteria breaks down the nitrite into nitrate. Nitrate, while not great in large amounts, is way less toxic than both ammonia and nitrite. That is the bare bones basics of the process. These nitrifying bacteria are literally everywhere. So if the tank has a source of ammonia, these bacteria will naturally colonize your aquarium. But this process can take weeks or even months. And that sounds like a major bummer, having to wait that long. But don't get too worried, as there are methods and even products that will greatly speed up the process. When it comes to cycling shrimp tanks specifically, it can be a little bit easier because shrimp are tiny little creatures that don't eat very much and produce very little ammonia. But with that being said, they're also very sensitive to ammonia. If you have ammonia in your shrimp tank, it is going to be very bad. So it is of the utmost importance that your tank be able to convert ammonia to nitrite and then nitrite to nitrate. So I guess you're probably thinking, tell me about those methods and products that I can use to speed up the process of cycling an aquarium. Basically, there are two ways you can really speed the cycling process up. The first is by taking a filter or filter media from an already existing healthy and established tank. The key part is healthy and established. You wouldn't want to transfer over anything from a tank that is not healthy, as you may introduce bad things to your new tank in the very beginning. This transfers over the nitrifying bacteria from the old tank to the new tank. This is actually the method I used for years, and it wasn't until the last couple years that I started using a new method. The new method I have been using is as simple as buying a product and following the directions. I mean it, seriously. Seachem has a product called Stability. Stability is literally the nitrifying bacteria we need in a bottle. So for the last couple of years, whenever I set up a new tank, I followed the directions on the bottle. Then I will start the tank off slowly, only feeding a very little for the first month or so. This part is very important whether you use Stability or media from another tank. The tank is new, and while cycled enough to add some shrimp, it is not yet fully established and is not yet prepared to handle a large load of waste. But with that, we can get back to the part that makes shrimp tanks a little easier. Shrimp don't need much to eat at all. They don't need very much at all and produce very little waste. Basically, anytime I start a new tank, it is usually only with a handful of shrimp at first. So then I know that I'm not overloading the tank's ability to process waste. Stability. If you have seen any of my videos before, you most likely have heard me say that stability is key. If you ask 10 people what the ideal perfect water parameters are for cherry shrimp, you very well could get 10 different answers. I think this causes so much unneeded confusion for people that are just getting into shrimp keeping. If you have healthy, strong cherry shrimp, they can adapt and thrive in almost any type of water parameters. So what the exact water parameters are really means very little in most cases. What does matter is that these water parameters stay the same. For cherry shrimp, stable and consistent water parameters is far more important than exactly what they are. Here are some things that can mess up the stability in your shrimp tank. You use a different water source. Let's say you started your tank with your tap water. Then you think that the shrimp could be doing even better if you used better water. So you add bottled water or spring water. Chances are the bottled water or spring water has vastly different water parameters than the tap water that you started your tank with. This can cause disaster for your shrimp. Here's one that can cause people some issues, and that is if your city or town changes the source of water. This is a tough one, especially if you're not notified about the change. Sometimes this can happen seasonally. Say for the most of the year your town pumps its water from a reservoir, but during the dry spells the reservoir gets low, and then they switch to pumping out of a river. It's still your same tap water, but the parameters can change drastically. Always chasing perfection is another, whether it be messing around with parameters trying to chase those perfect numbers. I've had to have said it 1,000 times by now. Stable is better than perfection. Always messing around with the tank, trying to get that perfect look, or overdoing maintenance. While going through Facebook shrimp groups, I have seen a lot of people make this or similar remarks. They had all kinds of trouble getting their shrimp tanks going. So many problems they just kind of got mad and gave up and quit messing with it. After a while, they start noticing more and more shrimp in the tank. They oftentimes will refer to this as neglect. I refer to it as stability. Shrimp like it being the same more than anything. Feeding the right stuff in the right amount. Want to know what the quickest way to kill a shrimp tank is? That is to feed too much. In fact, you are better off never feeding your shrimp versus feeding them too much. If you ever worry that you are feeding too much or not enough, You always want to err on the side of feeding less. Like I talked about earlier, about starting a new tank, always start out feeding very little. Shrimp don't need very much food and produce very little waste. If you feed more food than your tank can break down, it will cause an ammonia spike, which usually means certain death for shrimp. Now, what do shrimp like to eat? What is the right food? Well, this one is actually pretty easy. Shrimp are scavengers and will eat pretty much anything. Algae? Yum! One of their dead shrimp buddies? Sure, why not? But reality of it is that pretty much any commercial food will be okay for shrimp. With that being said, there are all kinds of excellent foods that have been formulated just for shrimp. A good food for shrimp will have a wide variety of ingredients. The variety of many different ingredients makes sure that shrimp get all the nutrition that they need. I have my own blend of food that has both ingredients from plants and algae and ingredients from animals, which is usually derived from bugs or bug larvae. Foods that are higher in protein will be better for breeding and getting baby shrimp to grow. But with higher protein levels, you need to be extra cautious because it can be far easier to overfeed when you're using high protein animal-based foods versus low protein plant-based foods. The key point here is feeding too much is the quickest way to kill a shrimp tank. So if you're in doubt, always err on the side of feeding less, especially if you're still figuring out shrimp keeping. They really don't need that much food at all. Getting good, healthy shrimp. Remember when I said at the beginning that if you're having a hard time starting out and feel like you've done everything correctly, everything tests fine, but you keep having new shrimp struggle to get going? Maybe they all die, or maybe they just seem slow to breed, or just not a lot going on. It could simply just be that you keep getting bad shrimp that are already almost dead by the time you get them. When it comes to big-time commercial shrimp sellers, they are 99% of the time importing thousands of shrimp from overseas. The more they buy, the cheaper they get them. So after the shrimp get pulled out of these disease-ridden giant ponds with millions of shrimp, they then get dumped into a bag and sent across the world with however many thousands of their buddies. Oftentimes they end up at a distributor who then rebags them and sends them off to other retailers. All this moving around from different water parameters, going from bag to bag to location is very hard and stressful for shrimp. Then you have to worry about all the diseases and parasites they may be carrying. How many times have you seen people in shrimp groups posting pictures of their shrimp asking, "What is this?" Whether it be the green fungus type of thing, various parasites, or bacterial infections. The truth of the matter is that there are a lot of shrimp sellers who are simply toxic for the shrimp keeping hobby, setting hobbyists up for failure. All they care about is getting the shrimp to live just long enough to collect your money. Many of these places are just rebagging operations. Shrimp come in and immediately get rebagged and sent off to an unsuspecting customer. Many times, someone who is new to shrimp. If you get sick or already almost dead shrimp as a new shrimp keeper, you're probably doomed before you even can really get started. Now, don't take this as me hating on all people selling imported shrimp, because that is not the case at all. I have several good friends who sell imported shrimp, and they do all they can to make sure that they are selling healthy shrimp. But even with something like a 30-day quarantine, which is by far and away beyond what most shrimp importers do, you still have no guarantees. Let me explain. I wanted to try some of these new dark blue Neos that are sold as ocean blues. I got these shrimp from a friend who imported them from Taiwan. I know he thought he was sending me good healthy shrimp. The quality of these shrimp is simply amazing. They're beautiful. And when I got them, they all looked fine and healthy. But knowing what I know about imports, I put their tank on a very strict quarantine protocol, because the last thing I want is some weird neocaridina disease from Taiwan ravaging my shrimp tanks. So anything that even came close to touching this tank was bleached before ever touching another one of my tanks. At first, they seemed to be mostly okay. It's normal for any new shrimp to go through a period of acclimation and getting used to their new home. They bred a little, but not much, and several ended up dying over the first few months. But like I said, they were breeding a little, so I wasn't too worried. However, since they never really were acting fully right, I've kept them on a strict quarantine. After 3 or 4 months, I started seeing signs of parasites. So the shrimp were infected with them from the very start, even with no visible signs of anything being wrong. Luckily, since I've been breeding and selling shrimp as my living, I have hundreds of dollars worth of medications on hand just in case it's needed type of thing. Not everyone is going to have these meds, and even less people are going to know how to use them correctly. Here we are around 9 months later, and still they don't breed worth a crap. And from time to time, still picking out dead ones. I am breeding thousands of shrimp in all my tanks. I breed shrimp for a living. And if I can't get these shrimp going, what chance do you think a newbie has? And these shrimp came from a friend who was doing me a solid. No ill feelings from me, but that is just the reality of imported shrimp. Just imagine how bad of luck a newbie may have getting shrimp from one of the bad importers who doesn't give a flip, and all they care about is getting them to live long enough to collect their money. I've had dozens of people thank me for the healthy shrimp I send them. Many tell me they've had shrimp 3 or 4 times before and couldn't get them to live for more than a couple days. Get my healthy homebred shrimp and have hundreds within a couple months. So don't set yourself up for failure before you even get started. Find yourself a good, healthy, homebred shrimp. Sure, they're probably a little more expensive, but they're not imports that someone might have paid a dime for and hope they live long enough to sell and make a buck or two. Patience and consistency over time. The last subject I want to cover here, I am calling patience and consistency over time. These are things to keep in mind during your journey into shrimp keeping. The first thing is water changes. Whether to do water changes on a shrimp tank and how often can be a matter of debate. Basically, it boils down to how much food are you putting in your tank. If you're just feeding a teeny tiny bit of food once a week and have a good amount of healthy plants growing, you may never need to do a water change. If you're feeding food that is high in protein every day, then you may need to do frequent water changes. My suggestion is if you are just keeping a tank to enjoy with shrimp with the least amount of time and effort, then feed very little. Shrimp don't need a lot of food to survive. If you're trying to breed as many shrimp as possible for profit like I do, then you want to feed pretty much daily and do frequent water changes. Most people will fall somewhere in the middle. Like we talked about earlier, if you don't have a good, steady, reliable water source, then you may want to take the approach of minimal food and less water changes. Shrimp safety. Shrimp are very, very small. Baby shrimp are even a magnitude smaller. That means shrimp are on the menu for pretty much every fish. If the shrimp can fit in a fish's mouth, there stands to be a good chance that it will get ate. Even if your shrimp hide enough to keep a colony going to small fish, the shrimp will always be hiding and you will not be able to fully enjoy your shrimp. Shrimp that don't worry about becoming dinner are out and about doing your shrimpy thing in the open, allowing you to enjoy the shrimp to the fullest. Also keep in mind that many of the common aquarium filters are not shrimp safe. Again, back to the point of shrimp being very small, and baby shrimp being very, very, very small. You don't want your shrimp getting sucked up in your filter. So if you're going to use a power filter that sucks water through an intake, you need to make sure the openings where the filter takes in the water are small enough that baby shrimp cannot get sucked through. The best thing to do with power filters in my experience is to put a sponge on the intake. While there are many more details to get into when it comes to keeping shrimp than I have mentioned here, I fully believe that if you are able to be successful at the keys of keeping shrimp that I have mentioned here, I think that will certainly be enough to get you successfully started on your shrimp keeping journey. Starting off, remember to make sure your tank is cycled. That means being able to break down waste without having ammonia and nitrate issues. How much you feed ultimately depends on what your goals are with that tank. If you want to breed lots of shrimp, that takes more food, but more food means more maintenance. Always err on the side of what you think is not enough food, because overfeeding is probably the #1 and quickest way to kill a shrimp tank. Don't set yourself up for failure in the very beginning by getting diseased, unhealthy shrimp. You always have better luck with shrimp from a person who breeds their own shrimp, or shrimp keeping is their passion in life, not from someone flipping imported shrimp to make a buck. If you found anything I've said here to be useful, go ahead and subscribe. I have hundreds of videos about keeping shrimp, everything from helping beginners to advanced breeding on how to create your own line. If you have seen any shrimp that you might be interested in, go ahead and check out my website, markshellyaquatics.com, for quality, healthy, homebred shrimp. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. Bye.